This is a Soulfire production. Welcome to Mother. No, it's Mother. Welcome to Mother, the show where we can explore our inner mothers to actualize our greatest selves. Through interviews with incredible guests, live coaching sessions, and my own experiences, we're going to dive deep into embracing feminine values and reparenting ourselves. So be prepared to show up, hold space, and be mothered in a way you never have before, but have always needed. It's time we rewrite the Mother Code. Hi, and welcome to Mother, Rewriting the Mother Code with me, Dr. Gertrude Lyons. And I'm so excited for today's show and was really, really looking forward to the time I was going to have today with Julie Ryan. So welcome, Julie. I'll say that before I say a whole lot more about you.
What a delight to be with you.
Thank you. I've gotten to know Julie over the last 6 months or so after hearing you on someone else's podcast, which I love, how we can find out about each other, and was immediately drawn to what you do as a medical intuitive, a psychic, and your whole story, which I'm not going to share a whole lot of here because I want you to, because it's very profound and relatable. But when looking at some of your biomaterial, I noticed that I thought this was funny because this about you is at the very end of the bio when it was even though it was worded. So I'm going to say it first, which most importantly, Julie is a wife, mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, and friend. So I thought we'd start there. And instead of saying all the other great stuff about you. But as I said, psychic and medical intuitive, but has had just an immense business career and inventor and business starter of many, many businesses, which I'd love for you to share even a bit about what some of those were, because I find it really fascinating. And kind of came into your abilities and what you're doing here and now with this aspect of your work kind of naturally, and it evolved for you. And I think that's something that's really beautiful. And I want us to speak about that. But, your 35-year career inventing surgical devices, sold throughout the world, founding several companies in the medical natural gas, advertising, long-term care, compliance, and data breach prevention industries is also pretty profound in itself. So, and you're an author. Don't want to leave that out. Your book is amazing. What really happens as we transition from this life into the next. Angelic Attendants is like the main title. I've read it. I've loved it. I'm amazed by it. You've written some children's books and some other books that we can name, and we'll put all of that in the show notes. But Julie, I'd love it if you would share with my audience about you and your journey. And I want people to get to know you in that way. And then we'll take our conversation from there.
Well, thanks for that lovely introduction. And I love that you put mother, wife, sister, friend, all of that at the beginning, because that's the bottom line. All this other stuff doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's all the personal relationships that we have. And as you mentioned, I am a businesswoman and an inventor who learned how to do woo-woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. That's what I tell people. But I turn my abilities on and off at will. So I do laundry and fold laundry, and I fix dinner, and I, do regular stuff every day and have a regular life. And then I turn my abilities on and off, and my abilities are all learned. I learned how to do all these things. I am not a psychic who's had dead people chasing her since childhood, or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. Yeah. And everybody can learn this stuff, Gertrude. You know this, that we all come in with the ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it.
Yeah, I love that about you, Julie, like not making it out to be like, well, I'm, super special. Like it may have presented itself in a way that you were like, you couldn't ignore or didn't want to ignore, or it was there. And so you really did. And I love that you underline that, developed yourself, in your psychic and intuitive abilities. And I think that's something I speak about in a different way with rewriting the mother code is I really want us to work on what's anything that's in the way of us being in contact with our intuitive selves, with what we sense, what we feel, what's there and right for us. And that just that start, and then and it may lead us in this direction, or I may decide or just choose. I maybe haven't had that sense at all, but I want to, and to know that you can, I think is a huge invitation for people. And it takes some of that, a little of the woo-woo-ness out of it in a way that might be people can be more skeptical, I guess. So I
Well,
think
we
you
all
make it very
do it.
practical.
We all we've all had experiences where we think of somebody and then we run into them, or we get a text from them, or we get a
Yeah.
call or an email, and we say, "Oh my gosh, I was just thinking of you earlier today or yesterday." And we think, what a coincidence. Well, that isn't a coincidence. That's your intuitive ability at play. And little children, especially, which is
Yeah.
why I've written the children's books, little children can see spirits, they can communicate with spirits. We all come in with the ability. And then, about the age of 7 or so, after they've had a bunch of grown-ups say, "Oh, honey, that's not real. That's just your imagination," they learn to not trust it and they shut
Yeah.
it down.
Yeah.
Where if we were to just foster it and say, "Well, tell me about it," the children come up with information that can be corroborated with relatives or with historic documents online in the case of a past life situation, where you just think, there's no way my 3-year-old can make that up because they don't read yet. How do they know this information? And then when that happens and we can foster it, we teach them to learn to trust that sixth sense. And oh my gosh, what a problem solver. What a resource for them to have
Mm.
access to universal intelligence.
Yeah. Well, so much of what you said I want to comment on. It's so true. I was thinking everything from how much we are oriented toward our left brain thinking, side of logic and reason and language, um, in a way that really shuts down our right brain emotional side. I recently had Jill Bolte Taylor on the show, so I'm like very into, looking at these four characters and quadrants of our brain, but exactly what you described, like, well, that doesn't make sense, or they, how could they know that they can't read? As opposed to opening ourselves up to, we are all connected. This is, universal oneness and wisdom that is available to us. And it's in addition to just that playful side, right? Like it doesn't even, those are maybe some serious things that kids are saying, and, that can be really helpful. But there's also just that joy and pleasure and in the momentness. I think that's also something that I would imagine needs to be fostered in order to be that much more in touch with our intuitive or psychic abilities, is to really be present in the moment and not let our left brain thinking and even emotions like shut it right down, because that's
Well, we're
how we were
trained to
trained.
shut it down. Yeah, we're trained to shut it down. And one of my favorite stories about a child, one of my dear friends, her grandson, his name's Walt. It's not a great name. His name's Walter. And when Walter was about 3 or 4, he was in the pool or in a lake or something with his mom. He was swimming around and she was holding him. And he said, "Mommy, you're my favorite of all of my mommies." And she said, "Well, honey, I'm
Wow.
your only mommy." And she said, "No." He said, "No, no, mom, you're my favorite of all my mommies." And again, she said, "Well, I'm your only mommy." He said, "No, mom, here's how it works. Babies are born to a mommy and a daddy, and then they grow up and then they die, and then they're born to a new mommy and daddy, and then they grow up and they die. And we do this lots of times, and you're my favorite of all my mommies." And so, of course, she's on the
Yeah.
phone with her mom, getting her mom to call me, going, "What the heck? What is this with Walt?" And I said, "Well, what a compliment." And
Yeah.
and what
That's a lot.
confirmation that this little boy knows about past lives. How could he know that? He'd never been taught that. He hadn't
Mm-mm.
heard that. He wasn't reading yet.
No.
So how would he know that? We all come in with this intelligence. And we have the ability to communicate with anybody we want, whether they're spirits attached to a body or not, because we're all spirits attached to a body having a human experience, and everything's made of energy. Our heads are like big satellite dishes, and we receive and transmit frequencies. So to get in touch with somebody telepathically, all we have to do is think of someone, whether we knew them or not, is irrelevant. So who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to Moses or Napoleon or Elvis or Mother Teresa or whomever. It doesn't matter whether you knew them or not. Your grandmother, you just think of them and they immediately come in, their spirit.
I I mean, I've that's so beautiful. How lovely. And because I've thought about this was something I was thinking about asking you. So you just answered it. I must have been
I must be
intuitively
psychic or
communicative.
something. Yeah. ESPN. That's what we always say that. I
Sending
forget
me
what the movie
messages.
was. It was Amanda Seyfried, the actress, and they were doing something like she goes, I must have ESPN. Instead of psychic ability.
Sure. Yeah, extrasensory perception network.
There
I
you
guess we
go.
could say that.
Yeah.
Which was thinking about because I tune into or pray to and ask for support from divine feminine, presences like Kali and Mary, and taught to kind of believe like yes, you can. Well, first of all, I was raised Catholic, so you know in the fact that, somewhere along the line it was decided by the patriarchal notion that you needed an intercessor and we're going to try and cut off that direct communication because obviously it's powerful and it works. So I've thought of, but this is like a whole different way of thinking about prayer, I believe, that I really am connecting directly. And I don't know, it seems kind of obvious, but it just, the way you're describing it is really striking me uh, really profoundly and in
I
an
have a
opportunity.
story. I have a
Oh,
story about
please.
the Virgin Mary.
Mm,
She shows up in healings when I'm having a healing done by my mentor of 30 years,
mm,
with whom I studied for 6 years, all of this woo woo stuff. And, anyways, I was last week, I had a client who told me that she was a painter and she painted a portrait of the Virgin Mary or painted an oil painting of the Virgin Mary. It's huge. It's like 10 feet by 7 feet or something. And it's
amazing.
hanging in a church in Memphis, Catholic church in Memphis. And the next morning I came in and I turned on my computer and she had sent me a photograph of her standing next to her painting. The face of the Virgin Mary was my mother's face, Gertrude. I
Oh,
gasped and I said, holy mackerel. And it was my mother, how she looked when she got married when she was around 30. She was in her late 20s, early 30s. And it was so interesting because the painting is in color, but the face is in black and white. And at first, even I, after doing this tens of thousands of times, with tens of thousands of clients over all these years, I thought, okay, am I imagining this?
right.
So I sent a picture of it to my brothers, both my brothers, and my husband and my son. And I said, who's this look like? And they all came back and they all said, Nana or mother. And I said, okay, I needed to verify that I wasn't seeing
Even for
things.
myself.
And so
Wow. Wow.
that was a message from my mother who's been dead 20 years this year.
Mm,
And it was a message from my mother. And think about how unlikely is that?
right.
I could show you a picture of her wedding. It is her face that this woman painted 15 years ago on this Virgin
Wow.
Mary painting that's hanging in a church in Memphis. So the Virgin, that whole mother energy
Yeah.
shows itself to us in a multitude of ways. And I find when we're open, it shows in ways there's no way we could imagine. I expected to see a painting of a Virgin Mary statue or, depiction that I'd seen many times, something that
Sure.
would look like that. But here it is, my mother's face. I posted it on my social media. If you go to Ask Julie Ryan on any of the social media
Oh, I will.
platforms, you'll see it.
I'm going to look for that. Well, interesting little thing that just happened while when I brought up the Virgin Mary and you said, "Oh, I have a story of the Virgin Mary," this something fell over next to me, and then I picked it up. I'm like, "I think I know what that is." And it was this, like literally like fell over. And I
You
just felt
can't
like I
make
got a
that
little
stuff
message.
up.
You can't make
You
that
can't make
up.
that stuff up. And I have
Oh,
goosebumps with you
in
just
case
saying that.
you're not actually watching this, what I just held up was it's actually a coaster of Our Lady of Guadalupe, um, Virgin Mary.
And
Yeah.
I just used her as an example earlier this week with a client because we were talking with her deceased father or somebody, I don't even remember who it was. And they said, I think it was the grandfather had died. She wanted to know if the grandfather had a message for her grandmother. And he said, look for the roses. And he showed me those big open roses that were
Mm,
inside the Virgin Mary's cape in
mhm.
Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was interesting is normally when there are Marian apparitions, I obviously was raised Catholic like you because I know all
Mhm.
this Catholic stuff. But when the Virgin Mary shows up, most of the time there is a scent of roses in the air.
Mhm.
And I thought that was fascinating that he showed me a rose, and immediately what I thought of was Our Lady of Guadalupe. And now you're showing me a picture of her 2 days later.
I am. Yep.
Yeah,
Well, I hope those listening are co-voyaging with us and, whatever meaning you can draw from I what I'm aware of, Julie, is it's awakening yourself to the things that are going on around you all the time that I'm just not tuning into, right? But if I choose to tune into them and find the meaning, I don't have to know what it is, but I got goosebumps when that happened. And
me too.
I'm going to trust that sense. I could explore it further if I wanted, or I could just enjoy that moment just happened and smile and feel like, oh, I'm not alone right now. Now I'm tearing up. That I'm never
Well,
alone.
and
Right.
and a couple of things. Those goosebumps are validation bumps from spirit. That's spirit saying, "Yeah, pay attention to this. This is this. There's more to the story than this. This is not a coincidence." And
Mhm.
coincidences, there are no such things as coincidences. But I think the synchronicities of all of it in less than a week's time, my mother's picture shows up. Her face shows up on a portrait of the Virgin Mary. I get the rose thing for Our Lady of Guadalupe. You bring it up. Your coaster of Our Lady of Guadalupe falls over. I mean, that's all within a matter of days. And I always say, you
Mhm.
just can't make this stuff up. And that
No.
synchronicity that we experience, we're being led. There's something there that we're being led to explore. And if
Mhm.
we can just, to your point, Gertrude, just be open and see where we're being led step by step. We don't need to have a roadmap
Mm-mm.
because what they say, make plans and watch God laugh.
Yeah.
We all do that. And so,
I
yeah,
love that.
interesting.
Well, I love that. And there was something else I was thinking about when you were talking about um, I forget who it was that said you're my favorite of all my mommies. Was that your
My
nephew?
friend's
Your
daughter,
friend's
my
friend's
friend's
daughter.
daughter's son.
Yep.
So my friend's grandson, Walter.
It reminded me, it brought me back. I had whatever you call it, like this. I was actually with my daughter. She was probably definitely less than 3 months old, like little, and I had her at a retreat with me. So I'm kind of in that zone space a bit of being more mindful and thoughtful. And literally, I think it was a time for us to just go be quiet with ourselves. So I had her with me, and I can't say 100%. I know I was meditating or what I was actually doing, but I was suddenly like struck with this fact that we were communicating. And she was saying, I don't know how she said it, but it was basically the communication was like, oh, now it's your turn to be the mommy. Like I was the mommy last time, and now it's your turn. And I was like, what? Like, w- you know, I didn't have like necessarily a bin to put that in, but I was open enough at the time to be like, cool, yeah. Oh, wow. I wonder, what that was like. I probably now in hindsight, it would have been neat to like kind of continue that conversation or, find out more, or tune in. But just to have that experience, right? I felt like
Well, we
was a
can
huge
do that.
gift.
We can do that
Oh,
anytime. We can do it
okay.
now if you want. We can find out what the circumstances were, where you were, when it was, all that kind of stuff. We do. I do past life. I call them past life scans all the time. And they're so much fun
Oh, well,
because
let's do one.
oftentimes we
Totally
can
am fun.
corroborate the historical documents online with the information that we get. Which tell me your daughter's name.
Her name is Morgan Elizabeth Lyons.
Okay. All right. Well, how I do this, of course, I'm an entrepreneur, so I have to do it differently than anybody
Yes.
else. That's what we entrepreneurs do. We hear something, we go, okay, well, we can tweak that.
Yes.
Most people do past life work with regressions, they'll do hypnotism and all of that. I envision myself in this endless hallway, Gertrude, and it has very tall ceilings, very narrow walls. And the walls are lined with big square mirrors, and they're all lined up perfectly horizontally and vertically. And each mirror represents a different lifetime. So we're going to ask a question and I'll say, show me which lifetimes this correlates with. And the mirrors that resonate with our question are going to come out from the wall as if they're on a hydraulic arm. And then I'll say, show me the one that correlates the most. And that one will come out the furthest. And then I'll envision myself walking into it. And it's like I'm walking into a movie, and I'll be given where it was and when it was and a little bit about what was going on. So, do you have a question in particular that we want to explore with that?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is because when I just shared it was, oh, I wonder, if she had more to say, or was there, more of a communication if I had kept the conversation going? Because she seemed, you know, certainly like happy that we were trading places now. And, it was a positive experience at the moment. But, is there more she would have liked to have said at that time?
So, I get a yes on that. We don't have to do a past life on that. I get a yes, she would have. But you can that's the thing that's so cool about this story of yours with her is that we can communicate with anybody telepathically, whether they're deceased or whether they're alive. We're
Mm,
communicating our spirit to their spirit. And that's what you were doing with that tiny baby. And certainly, indigenous cultures have been doing this since the beginning of time in
mm,
Australia and the Amazon and who knows where else, many, many other places. And they've been doing it for millennia. And as we've become more well educated, we've shut it down because
mm.
we were very proof based.
Exactly.
So, yeah. How about if we find out where your most recent past life was that when she was your mother?
Okay.
Okay. Do you want to do
Sure.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. I close my eyes. I turn my abilities on and off at will, as I mentioned, but I close my eyes because it gives me less distractions. And it's kind of like if you're watching a movie in a dark room, you can kind of pay attention to it more. So
Absolutely.
that's what I'm doing. So tell me your daughter's name again. I'm sorry.
Morgan.
Morgan. Okay. I'm a visual learner. Can you tell? You told me. And then I'm like, phew, if I see it, I remember it. All right. Do Gertrude and her daughter Morgan have any past lives in which Morgan was Gertrude's mother? Okay. A whole bunch of mirrors are coming out from the wall. Show me the one that's what? The most significant, the most recent. What are you most interested in?
Let's go with most significant.
Okay. Show me the one that's the most significant of all of these. All right. So I'm getting 1831. You're on cliffs in Ireland
Mm,
and you're aristocrats. You're an aristocrat. Your dad is an earl or a something like that, or a count or a duke or something along those lines. You have a big manor house that you live in, but it's way up high. I'm seeing it way up high on these cliffs overlooking the ocean. And what I'm getting with that is you're basically being forced to marry somebody for strategic alliance reasons more than love. And your mother is comforting you. Morgan's your mother. Your mother's comforting you because she went through the same thing. And she says you can develop love in any situation. You can learn to love your husband, even though you're not in love with them. And you're rebelling as the daughter, saying, I'm not marrying this guy. I'm going to run away, or I'll jump off this cliff, or I'll whatever. And you and your mother, Morgan, who was your mother in that lifetime, she is saying, no, 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 no. This is something that's going to be really good for our family, really good for their family. You're going to be the bond. You're going to be the, duchess or countess or whatever. And you're going to have a lot of prestige, and you're going to have a lot of influence over people to help people. And especially you can help other women by giving them and by empowering them is what I'm getting. So let's fast forward to this lifetime. Certainly the empowering women thing is going to resonate. What else resonates with you? Are you in a forced marriage? Are you in an arranged marriage?
I am not, but it's so interesting, of course I would say I fully chose it, but it's so interesting so my daughter's engaged and she is getting married next February. And these things are getting stirred up in me as she's planning her wedding that I didn't even give a second thought to. It's like, oh, I'm going to, of course, just do all the traditional things like that you do for a wedding. But somehow now, as she's going through it, I'm like infuriated with some of these practices. Like, I'm just like, where is this coming from? Like, I don't want to put this on her because this clearly is about me, but who does my husband think he is? Like claiming to walk her down the aisle and give her away to another man. Like, and I've just been, I haven't thought about it in a while, but when we were talking about this and that part of the wedding, and why am I so upset about that? And I'm like, now I know, and I thought, well, I didn't let myself really think about that now, in my 20s. And I really did, want to marry him, but there was a lot driving me marrying him around security, around him being well off, around him, being the one that would provide. And a lot of the, kind of traditional kind of patriarchal things, I was like totally on board for.
That's what we were trained to do. Yeah. That's what we were trained to do.
I was still working, I had enough of like feeling like I had a sense kind of myself, but really not was really. So I, just in this lifetime, things have evolved, but that adds just me, and I was tearing up as you said it. It was like, oh, almost like I could feel it in my gut. And why, when I see those stories or, hear them or watch them in the movies or that they're just, I just want to break something, sometimes and upset. But then when you said, well, but you can use your position, for the greater good and learn to love. And there's this other aspect of it that isn't just about, smashing the patriarchy kind of thing. You know what I mean? Of course, I want some things to change there and they need to. And our whole conversation is about that, about what we value and all that. So I'm not saying let go of that, but also, include in that, not just to make the best of it, but no, you really still have a lot of power. And how are you going to use that power? And what are you going to do to empower women and empower? So, wow. Hi, I'm so excited to share with you my 2024 Spring Equinox Self-Mothering Retreat that's happening this March 2024. And I would love for you not only to consider it, but to attend. But in considering it, hey, just knowing that you would be leaving cold weather, if that's the space that you're in, and coming down to just magnificently beautiful, warm, nourishing place of Zihuatanejo, Mexico. Zihuatanejo meaning land of the goddess women. And coming to really take time for yourself Okay. And that I am learning more and more isn't just a nice thing to do or something extravagant or something selfish. It's essential. And I really want you to take it seriously to consider, just think about what would it take for me to go. It's a 5.5 day retreat, getting from where you are, getting there, landing there, and then being in a space that is all about you. It's all about nourishing you. It's all about tuning into you, using everything around us, the nature, the food, the beautiful people, the rituals, ceremonies. I bring it, we really bring it. And we go deeper and deeper as the days go on, and we release, we let go, we bring in what is nourishing, what is empowering, what is that space of just really divine feminine energy. And we do it in the community of women. It's not for everyone. I will be honest, if the idea of leaving and not making it work or it's just too hard, not for you. If the idea of, spending that amount of time inwardly focused and going to that level of self-awareness doesn't sound like something you're willing to do or put the time and energy into, then it's not for you. And it's good to know that, right? So this is for people who are serious about what it means to mother themselves, what it means to take time for ourselves and that gift and what that gift can bring to us. It was originally right after my fall retreat. It filled right up. But now some people, it turns out, are not able to come. So I do have a handful of openings. And if you're listening to this and you're willing to take that step, please reach out to me. We can do a discovery call, or you can put a deposit down. I would love that. And you can do that by going to my website, www.drgertrudelyons, DrGertrudelyons.com. Go to events, and there you go. It'll all be there. There's a beautiful page there for you to explore. I look forward to hearing from you and then seeing you on my spring retreat. That is beautiful. Thank you so much. What a gift.
You're welcome. And the thing about past lives that I find is really interesting, Gertrude, is that I think I talk in analogies a lot because it gives our human minds a frame of reference for all this woo-woo stuff that we talk about. Mm-hmm. And my analogy for past lives is we'll see a theme that will run through multiple lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And we all come in with things that we want to explore when we incarnate. Our spirit wants to explore things. And when we see that running theme, and we've just made several analogies that correlate with these 2 lifetimes of yours, is think of Shakespeare's Hamlet. How many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602? Who knows? But certainly different time period, what was happening in the world, different location, what city, what country, what was the climate? What was the language? Who were the actors? Who was the director? Who was the producer? Was it inside? Was it outside? So many different variables, same script, different perspective. And that's what I see our spirit doing. Each lifetime we expand, we explore things from our perspective at that time in that lifetime. Yeah. And then we build on that. Certainly today, look what you're doing to empower and educate women. Mm-hmm. That you couldn't have done that back then. It wasn't possible. And in this day and age, you have a global audience, and your reach is so much bigger. And back then you went through that marrying somebody you didn't want to marry for strategic alliance situations, reasons for the family, and you made the best of it, and you flourished in it. And then you took what you learned in that lifetime and then you ramped it up in the next lifetime and kept ramping it up until you came to this lifetime, and you'll ramp up the next one after this. The other thing I think that's important to remember is that time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time is a human creation. Mm-hmm. So we think, oh my gosh, all those lifetimes. I mean, that's so long ago. It may not even be a blip on the radar screen of all those lifetimes combined. And then you really want to watch people's heads explode. You say, sometimes lifetimes, some schools have thought our lifetimes exist simultaneously. They coexist simultaneously. Oh,
So
Yeah.
mind blowing. It's like
All
so
right.
hard to even wrap your
Right.
it makes it in a wordless way, it makes so much sense. Like it's like, well, yeah, of course. And then when I try and think about it, I'm like, I can't even,
Me
It's
neither.
like-
Me neither. Is it feasible though? Certainly. Do we
yeah.
understand it? No. Will we understand it when we're back in non-physical and we're in heaven? Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I love that. Okay. Well, there's several directions I'm thinking about here, but one while we're on this mother-daughter aspect, I wanted to name something and just at least acknowledge it and see where we want to take it, which is in your book when you describe being at someone's bedside as they're dying, and with them through their transition experience. There's always a role that the mother takes in this. And I just found that so fascinating and profound. And I wanted to ask you to just speak to that for a couple moments.
Sure. Everybody, when they die, will go through this too. We all go through what I call the 12 phases of transition. And that's a configuration of angels and deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets that surround us as we're in the dying process. And the mother energy, the mother spirit that's closest to the person who's dying is always the one running the show. So, for instance, my mother's deceased. If I was dying, my mother would be running the show. If she was still alive, it would be my maternal grandmother. If she was still alive, it would be her mother. It's always on the maternal line, which surprised me because the first time I saw this, Gertrude, was when my own mother was dying 20 years ago. And I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. But it was my grandmother, my Mima, who had died 6 months prior to my mother, who was running the show. I thought it would be her guardian angel or it'd be God, like having some kind of air traffic control, putting this together or something. I didn't know. And so my Mima was there first. And then my mother's father spirit showed up. Well, he died when she was 12. I had seen pictures of him, but I never met him. He was there. And then these angels came in. And the angels appear to me like what you imagine probably is the same. We were taught as little Catholic girls that big wings, white gown, flowy hair to the shoulder, barefoot, sometimes a belt made out of a rope tied at the waist, kind of a thing. That's how they're depicted. So that's how we're taught they look. So that's how they appear to me. So I'll know what that energy is. Certainly, somebody raised in a different culture may see angels as just a blob of green energy or something totally different. And as the person approaches death, this circle of angels anchored by the parent spirit, still with the mother running the show from the spirit world. She is large and in charge. That circle starts to open up into a horseshoe, eventually into a straight line across the foot of the bed. And then many, many other spirits show up, and the spirits of deceased pets show up as well, which really amazed me. I saw spirits of people that had been dead for 20 or 30 years. I saw spirits of people that I'd never met who were my mother's relatives, like her grandparents and her great grandparents that I'd never met, but I'd seen pictures of them. I saw dog spirits that we had when I was growing up, my family. I saw dog spirits that my mother had that I'd seen in pictures. And at her funeral, my uncle and his wife flew in, my uncle and aunt. And I said, "Who's this dog?" And I described the dog. He goes, "Oh, that's Fluffy," or "That's Randy," or whatever the dog's. I mean, he knew instantly who that was. There was one of the fun stories about that is my Aunt Irene, my mom's brother's wife. They lost a toddler, their sixth child. She drowned in their backyard pool she was probably about 14 months, maybe 15 months. And I told Aunt Irene, I said, I saw Mima, my grandmother, with her, holding her. And I said, she's whenever she appears to me, she's wearing this little pink cotton dress with smocking across the chest and little puffy sleeves, those little baby doll sleeves like little babies do. little girl babies wear. And she said, that's the dress we buried her in.
Oh my gosh.
Well, when she died, I was 3. I wasn't at the funeral. I didn't know that.
And it,
That was, I said, okay, well, that's how she always shows up to me. So back to spirits are going to show up to us in a way that either we can identify them or we can give that information to somebody with whom we're talking so they can identify them in
I
that
love that.
situation. So it's really comforting to know that it's the mom. Another important point is our spirits attached to our mom's energy field before we're conceived.
I'd love to, I totally believe that. So I'd love to hear you talk
Yeah,
about that.
they look like I talked to a woman this morning, a client this morning, and I was describing she was having some infertility opportunities. And I said, well, you have 2 babies' energy above your right shoulder. And they look like little orbs, Gertrude, the kind that you'd see on a photograph. Sometimes we'll say, oh, the camera must have been screwy or there was a speck of
Yes.
light. No, those are spirits. If you blow those up on a desktop screen, like a monitor, sometimes you can see faces in them.
Oh, I
And
got to
they
do that.
remind me of the bubble that Glenda the Good Witch flies into
Mm,
Munchkinland
yes.
inside in The Wizard of Oz. That's what they look like. So the baby's energy attaches to the mom's energy field before they're born. We choose our parents. We choose when we're born, where we're born, to whom we're born, all of that. And adopted baby's energy does the same thing. And so
Oh,
they're considering doing embryo adoption, which was fabulous. She said, then I can
yes.
carry the baby. And she said, and we're considering regular adoption as well.
Mm.
And they were considering egg donor and they're considering all these different things. And I said, well, however that baby comes in is irrelevant because those babies have already chosen you.
Mm.
Back to the 12 phases of transition on my website, askjulieryan.com, there are illustrations of the 12 phases. And there's a button there where you can click on it. You can download. There's a free download of the chart of the 12 phases. And when somebody has a loved one who's dying, I'll say, go to the website, download the chart, save it on your phone. And then
Mm.
all you have to do, because back to our heads, our big satellite dishes, is you just say, what phase is grandma in? And you'll get a number. It'll be 7, 8, whatever. And then you can refer to the chart and it'll give you a visual
Yeah.
in an illustrative way.
So whether you can
Do that.
literally like see it yourself, you can know and
Oh, yeah. Well,
know
you're
that
going to
that's
get an
what's
answer.
happening. Yeah.
Absolutely. You ask, what phase is my grandmother in? What phase of transition? It's the first thing that pops in your head as fast as you can snap your fingers, or sometimes even before the question's even thought out,
Mm.
and it'll come in. And then you can refer to that. And if you see your loved ones progressing through 6, 7, 8 fairly quickly, you'll know, okay, it's time to get the family in here,
Yeah.
regardless of what the doctors are saying. It's time to get the family in here. People can be at phase 11. Phase 12 is liftoff with angels on either side, but they can be at 11. They can go back to 2. They can survive. One of my brother's best
Oh,
friends was at phase 11. He was having surgery. I didn't think he'd get out of the operating room. 20 years later, he's up walking around just fine.
oh.
So it's not an exact science, like nothing
No, it's
is,
not like
but it's a
which
guide. It's very reliable. And so what? You gather the family together and grandma lives for another 2 years. How wonderful. Grandma knew you
great.
were all there. Yeah.
Exactly. And we got to be in that experience more fully and, more connected in a
Right.
way. So I love that it
Right.
brings that. And I also want to underline from what you said about, you know, the maternal side that's there as you transition out of life. And then also even preconception, that's there, that just underlining the power of that. And I don't have to say woman, but, feminine aspect, spirit, like that's pretty darn powerful,
It
right?
is.
And it's when I hear things like that that I, you know, not like it makes it okay, but yeah, no wonder if we're gonna move into, and try and create a world that is more left brain thinking oriented, like, yeah, we're gonna just squash that and try and belittle it or, because I was thinking about what you said. There's no way I could do what I'm doing now back in 1831. Well, if you were doing what you were doing, you would have been burned at the stake, right? Like you would, we, bad things would have happened to both of us, in that regard. So that we've moved that along, but I always think that speaks to, just the beautiful power of our feminine yin aspects, that isn't man woman, it's male female, that we just want to have equal energy, equal, the equality to me is all about value, and that we value all those aspects. And I think that's what your work does so profoundly, is value those, very feminine aspects that aren't uh that, even though we're safe and, you're not going to get burned at the stake, they're still not the norm yet. Right. And I think that once we bring those more online, it's a lot will change in our world that needs to. So I wanted to underline that because I think it's very true. Well, one more thing that we talked about doing, because I selfishly get to, like, do this, but at the same time, I love highlighting the different aspects of the work that you do. So, we highlighted kind of the psychic, or like the past life aspect, the being there and being able to call upon and participate in the passing of someone, which I think is just as beautiful. When we get rid of our thinking about death is like so bad and scary, it's just as beautiful as life coming in, like our life going out. I think you also really underline that. But the medical intuitive aspect, because I told Julie before we started recording that I'm dashing off to get a ultrasound on my calf because I've had issues. It's sore and it's been going on a long time, and it started concerning me because I have a history of a blood clot and a pulmonary embolism that I had probably, oh gosh, how long ago was that? Hmm, 5 years, 5, 6 years, something like that. Um, so I said, if you're game, maybe we could visit what's going on in my calf and do that. And you said yes.
Sure, absolutely. One point I want to make before we do that, just back on the 12 phases of
Oh, sure, sure.
transition, is that everybody goes through 12 phases regardless of how they die.
Oh,
If they die instantly, like in the case of a homicide or suicide, or they die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, years, even. Everybody goes through the 12
mm,
phases. And remember, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. And then one other point along those lines, I believe that cultures have known this since the beginning of time. Two reasons. Number one, on the maternal thing, in the Jewish tradition and faith, the child is not considered to be a Jew unless the mother that births it
true.
is Jewish. I have friends that converted to Judaism because they wanted to raise their kids Jewish because it was very important to their husband and the husband's family. And so they did, so that the children would be Jewish when they were
Mm,
born. The other thing that corroborates, I think, that this has been around since the beginning of time, I believe that people have been able to see these phases of transition because in the Roman Catholic funeral, there's a prayer said at the end of every Catholic funeral. I know you've been to many, as I have, and it's called In Paradisum,
mm,
which talks about the angels and your deceased ones, your deceased loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. In Paradisum means in Latin, into paradise. So when I was writing my book, I thought, oh gosh, where did that prayer originate? Because that's what I see when
yeah.
somebody's dying. And 99.99999% of the time, I'm not with them. I'm doing this remotely
Hmm.
and helping the family through this. So, what I learned, Gertrude, is that the In Paradisum originated as a 5th century Gregorian chant. Well, certainly people were not well educated, and maybe it
Mm-mm.
took till the 5th century till somebody was. And who were the most well educated people? Who were the most learned people? They were men living in
Yes.
monasteries and synagogues. And so some monk wrote down what everybody was able to see. And it stayed there since the 5th century as part of their ritual. I find that remarkable.
Yeah.
That that's still there. So
I
back to
love
the
you underlining that.
yeah, back to the medical intuitive part of the equation. That's most of the work that I do.
Mhm.
And people go to see many, many doctors, and they have lots of different diagnoses and different treatment programs and treatment suggestions. And they usually come to me when they have symptoms that just will not abate. And they just think, oh my gosh, I just don't even, I don't know where to go. And
Mhm.
doctors send clients to me as well when they don't know what the deal, they don't know what's
Mhm.
going on. And so I work with people all over the world. Again, I turn my abilities on and off, and I'm like a human MRI. So I'll connect my spirit to their spirit telepathically. I'll close my eyes. I'll watch a laser beam come from me wherever I am. You could be on Mars and I could scan you. It doesn't matter. You could be in
Right.
another solar system. It doesn't matter because it's my energy connecting with yours. And then 3 things happen. Number 1, something's identified. Immediately thereafter, there's some type of energetic healing that will begin. And that can take the form of something getting added, something getting removed. I watch procedures all the time in my mind's eye that emulate what I saw in operating rooms for decades when I was in there developing products, testing prototypes, that kind of thing. Sometimes I see healings that utilize methodologies and devices that haven't been invented yet. And regardless of what I'm seeing in my mind's eye, I'm very descriptive with you because
Mhm.
if you can envision it, it's going to help integrate the healing into your
Mm.
body. So at the end of the day, the healing will happen on the energetic level. It will integrate into your body. That can happen instantly. It can take days, weeks, months. That may need some kind of complementary care, like going to get a sonogram on your calf
Mhm.
and getting medicine, perhaps, or whatever. But certainly, it's always our spirit's prerogative to utilize a healing in a way that's going to best facilitate whatever it is our spirit's exploring. And you
Right.
know, as well as anybody, nobody heals anybody else. We all
Nope.
heal
It has to be our
ourselves.
totally.
At the end of a surgery, the surgeon's going to close the incision with sutures and staples. The surgeon doesn't make the patient's skin grow back. The patient makes their own skin grow back. And that's with everything, whether it be a doctor or other medical provider or a shaman or a healer or whatever. We facilitate the person healing themselves. And that's
Mhm.
what I do. So the work that I do on the medical side of the equation is, I believe, complementary. It's part of the healing equation to Western and Eastern medicine as
Mhm.
we know it. And now I know why I spent all that time in the hospital supply industry for 30
Right?
years.
Yes.
Yes, because I have enough of knowledge base that I have some idea of what I'm seeing, and then I can always ask spirit. So it's spirit that works through me and with me to help facilitate healing.
Mm.
So that's how it works.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So do you want me to scan you real
Please.
fast?
That
Okay.
would
All
be
right. Here comes my
nice.
laser beam from Sweet Home, Alabama, heading to you up in Chicago. And because you're in Chicago, right?
I am.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
okay. That's what I thought. All right. And then shooting energy. So the energy is going to your right calf first. Is it your right leg?
it is.
Okay. All right. And tell me what your symptoms are.
Yeah. Well, it started about a month ago. And at first it felt like a pulled muscle, like up near my, like kind of in the back of my leg, like where my knee and, or, where you bend your leg. Right. So I thought,
Right.
oh, I like strained something there. And then that lasted and then it kind of went away. And it's weird because it feels like it's like traveling around my leg, like different sorenesses are happening in my leg. And this most recently now, it just kind of feels like somewhat of a throbbing, but kind of a like I have a hard time walking on it. It's a little swollen, but not like and
Is it hot?
and it's but it's not hot.
Not hot.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's
I'm not seeing a blood clot
okay.
in my mind's eye. I'm seeing some kind of muscle thing going on.
Okay.
So muscles look like fibers to me. And what I'm watching is I'm watching stem cell energy get applied to it. Now, stem cell energy looks like a light amber colored gel. It's
Mm,
kind of watery, has sparkles in it because it's woo woo. Got to have sparkles in some of this
okay.
stuff to make it
Yes,
fun.
of course.
And it reminds me of dippity doo. Remember Dippity Doo back in
Yeah, I
the
do.
day?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're similar age.
For those of you that don't know what we're talking about, it was a hair gel in the 60s and 70s that that women used. And I had a babysitter that used it. I thought it was just the coolest stuff. So when I was little. So there's a vortex that's spinning above the back of your knee, or not above, behind the back of your knee. And what it's doing is it's fixing those fibers that look like they are torn. Reminds me of when I see a muscle tear, the the big rope, maybe the twisted rope that's used to dock a ship or a boat.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll get frayed on the outside of that rope. The rope is still sturdy, but it's starting to fray a little bit. That's what this looks like to me. So I think your muscles are trying to heal, and then you walk or you're doing
keep
something
doing something to.
Yeah. And it's tweaking them again. And so I'm watching that heal. Interesting thing about this stem cell energy healing is this stuff can regenerate anything. And it's so fascinating to watch because there have been times where organs are regenerated with it and they show up on subsequent scans and it freaks out the doctors. That's hilarious when that happens. But I believe what I'm watching in my mind's eye is I'm watching what the body does on its own all day, every day. If you think about going back to your grade school science lessons, every cell has a nucleus. Every nucleus is surrounded by cytoplasm. Cytoplasm's a watery gel like Dippity Doo.
Yeah.
And our bodies have a centrifugal force in them that rotates and it causes the cells to divide and replicate. I'm just watching that happen in warp speed. So I'm talking to you, I'm getting information. I call that divine downloads. I'm getting information downloaded into my head and I'm watching it in my mind's eye, even with my eyes open. So good thing we're girls because we can multitask. It's just feminine superpower.
I can be with you as you're working.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad you're getting the ultrasound. I'm not seeing a blood clot. I've seen plenty of them. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing you've tweaked your muscle doing something, your calf muscle.
I knew it was a little risky to say because if it was, it'd be like, oh, okay. But either way, I trust your scan as much or more as I do an ultrasound. So I'm
well, let me know what they show up.
I will. Yeah, no, I will.
And if a blood clot shows up, believe it or not, the more important issue, the more pressing issue is going to be your muscles.
Yeah.
In your leg, because the most important thing's going to show up first. So when I have an hour with a client, most of the time we'll do medical. We can do a deep dive. I'll do several scans. Okay, we'll scan your liver. We'll scan whatever. I'll say, what are your symptoms? And then I'll hit all of those things. But I always go in blind first because I want to see where the energy is going to go first, because that's going to be the most pressing issue. And then I'll hit the other things. And then normally we'll talk to deceased loved ones, or I'll scan their pet, or we'll do a past life thing or whatever. We cram a lot into an hour and it's a blast. It is so much fun.
Well, I've had the wonderful opportunity to actually do a real, a session, not our podcast session, which is still just as amazing. But having a whole hour with you, I highly recommend, because I just got this one and I have another one actually scheduled. I already told Julie for next week. So we'll be able to dig into this further and take some of what we worked on today further, which I'm very excited about. But would you let everyone else know? We've mentioned some things kind of along the way, and there'll be obviously all the ways to get a hold of you and the show notes. But what are some ways that my audience can connect with you? Some of the best ways.
AskJulieRyan.com. That's the best place to start. And follow me on Instagram at AskJulieRyan. And then that we post stuff all the time: Instagram, Facebook, all those social media channels. Everything's at Ask Julie Ryan. And I'd love to offer my book to any of your listeners that's interested.
What a gift.
I'd be delighted to give it to you as a gift for free. And Angelic Attendants, what really happens? I have props. I'm like, on a game show here.
She's showing her book for
Angelic
those of you who might just be listening.
That's right. You might be listening, but check the YouTube channel and you'll be able to see it.
Well,
what
that's
really
hugely
happens?
Generous and wonderful, Julie.
And then my children's books. I've got angel messages for cats, for dogs, and for kids. And they are darling picture books, illustrations. They maybe have 20 sentences, short sentences in them. And so if you have kids or grandkids and you like a copy of those, let us know. And just go to askjulieryan.com, click on the Ask Julie button, say, hey, I heard you on Gertrude's show. I'd love a copy of your book. And we will send you the digital download and the audiobook version for free as a gift.
That's a beautiful gift, Julie. And you have a live radio show, right?
I do.
Might
Thursday
as well mention
nights.
that.
Yes.
I know
Thursday
it's on your
night.
website, but go ahead and say it here.
Yeah. Every Thursday night, Ask Julie Ryan is the name of the show. It's live. It's actually broadcast out of Chicago. And that's where it goes up on the satellite out of Chicago. And the station's in Evanston, actually. But it's a Chicagoland station.
Yes.
And talk radio. And then we remove the ads and then we release it as a podcast and also as YouTube. So it's on all of the podcast distribution channels and YouTube and on Alexa. And that's Thursday night at 8 Eastern. And it's a call-in show. It lasts 2 hours and people call in from all over the world and ask me health questions. Can you talk about my dog? I had one last night, Gertrude, where a woman called in and her son, who's in the military, has been missing for almost a couple of years.
Oh my
and
goodness.
we had a conversation with her son's spirit. And it's just all across the board. And it's a blast. It's such a crapshoot because I never know who's going to call in or what their questions are going to be. And it's very fast paced. It's very fun. You can listen to it, download it, and it'll cheer you up because the vibe is very high.
I have listened to episodes and I've loved it. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. I can't wait for everybody to listen. We'll be putting the show up soon. So my listeners will have a hold of it very soon. And thank you and look forward to our future times together.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for choosing yourself and taking the time to listen to this podcast. As always, please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother. Subscribe to Mother. It helps other people who need this message, aka all women. Well, actually, everybody, men included. I'm honored to have you on this journey in mothering yourself. Remember, change is uncomfortable, but it's beautiful, and it starts with us. And if you can't wait until next week's episode, follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn at Dr. Gertrude Lyons or at my website, drgertrudelyons.com. I'll see you next time.